Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Taylor and today is my January reading wrap up. So in the month of January, I read 23 books. I am going to put some reading stats on here so you can see kind of what we got going on. Most of what I read was actually manga and graphic novels because I was feeling like a little slumpy at the end of 2025 into the first few weeks of 2026. Was just having a little bit of a tough time, so I decided to read some just fun, still educational graphic novels and manga. So I'm going to be telling you about the books that I read today, and then we're also going to talk about books that I'm reading in February for Black History Month. So if that sounds good to you, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and let's hop in. The first book I finished in 2026 was called Degrees of Separation, A Decade North of 60 by Alison McCreish. This was a graphic novel. It was huge. It was like, yeah, this big. It was like really big, really heavy, about Allison. It was very memoir in like execution, but it also had a lot of history of the communities that are like north of the 60th parallel. So it's not quite the Arctic Circle, but very close to the Arctic Circle. I did have a hard time getting into this one. I feel like the first 50 or so pages I was kind of like, why do I care about like a white woman just kind of like doing her thing north of the 60, because she is not from this area. But then we really get into a lot of the history and how both the Canadian and United States government have really screwed over the Indigenous people that are north of the 60th parallel. So it had a lot of educational content in there. And then Allison was also an artist who traveled around north of the 60th parallel and taught a lot of art classes to, these smaller communities, and about the community that she lived in, because it was a very different way of life than like what you watching and me probably experienced. They lived in these like shacks called like the woodyard, like no plumbing, no electricity, very much. It's like living off the grid, but really it was just this subsect of like a city. It wasn't like a slum. I'm sure people viewed it as that, but it just like this really little tight-knit community of people who are like, I don't want to have all of the amenities of today's day and age. It's too much for me. I think if that's something that even remotely interests you, if you don't know a lot about life north of the 60th parallel, I know I didn't. It was on an end cap in my library that was literally about Arctic living and sort of things, and so I saw it and I was like, okay, this is coming home with me and I'm gonna read it. Because I really liked the story, I liked the art style as well. I thought it was really cool, very cozy, very good January read. Next was A Story of Seven Lives, the complete manga collection by Jin Shirakawa. This is a book about these two cats, and they are trying to just survive on the streets. If you read Warriors as a kid, this will give you a similar feeling, but they're not like out in the woods. They're in this city in Japan where they're just trying to survive, and they're kind of a part of this city plan of sorts, and all the cats are looking for like dinner tables is what they call them, and the people in the community kind of like rotate feeding all the cats. And so we have the cats, and then we also have this human, this woman who is dealing with a lot of grief and trauma. She like does that through these two little cats that we are following, and it's really, really sweet. I like ugly cried at the end of it. It is so sweet. It's a lot about healing from grief, because like the cat has its own grief because it thinks that its owner abandoned him, and then the woman has grief because the love of her life, like we find out very early on, he passed away, and she's like trying to move forward with her life. So that one was so good, very fast paced. I really liked the way that this story was crafted. I just thought it was just so nice. Next was Dead Wake by Eric Larson. I realized when I was editing other videos, I kept saying Deep Wake. I don't know why Dead Wake is so hard for me to say. This was my first book by Eric Larson. I do have another book by him that I want to read, but this is about the last crossing of the Lusitania. And I think Eric Larson does a really good job of crafting the entire narrative around what happened for the Lusitania to be sunk. Like, we talk a lot about Germany's place in the war, in World War One. Sorry, let me preface that. The United States' place in World War One. We talk a lot about Woodrow Wilson. You get a very comprehensive story, but in my opinion, I feel like it dragged a lot. This just clearly wasn't for me in the way that it presented information, and that is not the book's fault. I still thought it was interesting enough to finish and, interact with it, but after I read the next Eric Larson book that I have, I'm going to kind of reflect on if this is an author for me. I know he has a lot of really good books, and I'm not saying that he doesn't do a good job. I'm just not sure if his format of giving me information is what works for me. The next 3 books are Cat and Gamer Volume 2, 3, and 4. This is a 5-star series for me. I am loving the Cat and Gamer series. I only have 1 volume left, and I'm kind of putting it off because I'm like, no, I don't want it to end. But these are definitely books that I want to own if I can find like a box set or something. Like, I know that I would return to these again and again and again. Just so much fun. Cat and Gamer is about an office worker who adopts a cat, and she loves games. That's why it's called Cat and Gamer. She really lives her life just for work and gaming. But then one day her office is like, hey, we found this kitten in the parking lot. Does anyone want to like adopt it? Like, does anyone know whose it is? All this stuff. And she's just like, I'll take it home, just like on a whim. Not a pet person, never had a cat, never had a dog. And it's all about her learning about how to take care of this cat. Likens taking care of this cat to like levels and achievements, and it's really, really cute. I also read volumes 5, 6, and 7, so I only have 8 left, and so that did take up a huge chunk of my reading this month. Next is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I did not like this book. The tagline is Some Instructions on Writing in Life. I thought that it was fine. She is a adjunct professor of writing from what I gleaned from the book. I still got a little bit out of it. I tabbed it. This was on my 30 books to read before I turned 30, and I didn't like the way Anne Lamott talked about people of color. I think that she drew a lot of really odd comparisons. Like, she called a toddler a Muslim terrorist, and I just thought that was really odd. I didn't like that, and so I really, yeah, not great. So there's that. Next was probably my favorite book that I read, or like nonfiction that I read this month. This is Evicted by Matthew Desmond, Poverty and Profit in the American City. This is where Desmond followed 8 Milwaukee families, I believe it was, who struggled to keep a roof over their head. He talks a lot about the history of like slums and ghettos and why they are the way that they are. It also, I would say this book is a challenge in empathy as well. I saw a review on Goodreads where someone was like, these people suck, they make terrible decisions, and they're terrible to everybody, blah, 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 and they don't do what I would do, and da-da-da. And I don't think that that is a proper argument against this book, because the question is housing a basic human right? The answer is yes. Housing is a basic human right. Just because people don't do things the way that you would do them doesn't mean that they don't deserve a roof over their heads. And I think that while I even caught myself judging these people as well, because I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that. Well, I'm not in that situation. I didn't have to choose between electricity and food. You know, it's hard. I loved this book. Desmond is a great writer. I think at this point, like, Poverty by America was the best book, like nonfiction book that I read last year. I'm definitely going to read it again this year. This was also so good, much more story-based. It almost reads as if it were fiction. When you're reading about these things, you just can't, like, personally, because I've not been in these experiences, I'm like, oh my god, how do people do this? and I thought that this was really, really, really good. Next was a little comic. It's called I Will Judge You by Your Bookshelf by Grant Snyder. This was a bind up of comics that were about books. Just a little funny, haha, kind of just nice brain off sort of thing. And it's just an ode to loving books. I checked this out at my local library and it was a nice little palate cleanser. Next, I read Genderqueer, a memoir by Maya Kobabe. And this is about Maya's kind of growing up and figuring out how they want to identify. From a young age, they do not feel, they were assigned female at birth, and they don't feel like a girl or, you know, a woman. And they are really struggling with that. And it's a lot about how they're in their head and the things that they think about and the way they interact with their friends. And they're very lucky that they have a very accepting family. But also it talks about kind of the struggles and when like they then became more into like the pronoun lexicon and all of these things. I thought it was really, really good. There were things that I questioned in it. I thought that it was a really good conversation starter with some of my friends and just like very interesting because like when it comes to people who identify as non-binary, it's so person by person. And isn't that the beauty of it? But I understand that people who don't identify as non-binary, they can be like kind of confused by the whole thing. I personally think you just kind of got to take it as it is. Like if you have a friend that's non-binary and it's different from your other friend that's non-binary, you can't compare the two. It's an apples to oranges. It's like how everybody's different. And that's one thing I liked about this book. But I also know that a lot of people really identify with, I mean, just the conversations with yourself of like, who am I? How do I want to identify? And how do those labels change over time? Just a really, really amazing book. So the next book I read was Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma by Claire Dederer. This book asks the question, can you separate the art from the artist? The answer is no. No, you can't. But you have to decide for yourself how you want to interact with those intellectual properties. You know, is it good to outwardly express like your love and support for like an intellectual property, knowing that the author is a grade A piece of garbage, you know? And it dives into a lot of different things. Ultimately, it's up to you. But I thought that this was a really good and thorough deep dive. And it's really hard because, like I said, there's really no right answer. But I thought it was good in and of itself. I think that it is a good thought experiment and something you need to decide for yourself. Next is Boys Weekend by Maddie Lubchansky. This is about a trans woman who is going on a bachelor trip where she is the best man. She has been out transitioned for about a year now, and she has been struggling with the fact that it feels like her best friend, who is a man, doesn't entirely care that they are now identifying as a woman. And a lot of it has to do with her dealing with these things, but also we have this sci-fi element where the bachelorette party is happening on like an island that is supposed to represent Vegas. And then there's also like this think tank that everyone starts signing up for, like an MLM. And it gets crazy really, really quickly, but it was really fun, very fast paced. And the art style was really, really cool. Next was Macbeth. This is the copy that I own, but the one that I read, like physically, was the manga of Macbeth. I would use this and look over the like chapter notes for like Act 1, Scene 1. The overview is 3 witches plan to meet Macbeth. So I would like read that and then I would read Act 1, Scene 1 from the manga perspective. It was really nice. It like the dialogue is all the same. There are a few creative liberties, but really not a lot. I loved this so much. It was so fast-paced, so punchy. I think that if you want to read Shakespeare, I do think that this could be a really good place to start. It is the shortest of all of his tragedies, and I do think it was just super action-packed. Very fun. And Lady Macbeth is my new dream role. Next is The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan. This is the book 1 of the Kane Chronicles. We're following Carter and Sadie Kane, who are brother and sister, as like the opening scene is like their dad trying to release these Egyptian gods, and which is like a big no-no. You're not supposed to do that. and they're trying to save the world from these Egyptian gods that have come back. I feel this was like pretty long for what it was, in my opinion. I do wish that it had been edited down just a little bit. I liked how much we learned, but I feel that the plot was lacking in this. I do have the other two Kane Chronicles books. I do plan on reading them, and I do plan on keeping them just because young adult literature is something that I feel is really important, and I want to keep that within my library. But of everything I've read by Rick Riordan, this is probably one of my least favorites. Next was Persepolis 2, The Story of a Return by Marjane Satrapi. I really loved this. I actually liked this even more than part 1, but I would definitely want to own like the complete Persepolis. In this, so like at the end of part 1, Persepolis is sent off to Vienna to escape the religious fundamentalism that is currently taking over Iran. And this is taking place during the Iranian Revolution, I believe in the 1980s. And so it's about like her struggling, feeling alone, without a family, just kind of like bouncing from living situation to living situation in Vienna for like 4 years, and then eventually she goes back to Iran and, you know, living with family again and readjusting to life there. It was very easy to relate to, and the art style is really great. I think that it really showcases the struggles of growing up and how easy it can just be to get lost and not be able to find yourself again for a significant amount of time. Next is a children's book. I know that this might be a little controversial to put on my like finished books, but I honestly don't care. I read a book to my nephew. We read Curious George Discovers Plants by H.A. Ray. It was great. I'm not honestly the biggest fan of Curious George. That's like a personal thing. I've never really liked him, but I was watching him and I was like, Arthur, let's read a book. I mean, he's like not even one, so he can't respond or give his opinion, but I was like, okay, yeah, I'm reading you a book, buddy. And we had a great time. We had a great time together. Next is Welcome to St. Hell, My Trans Teen Misadventure by Lewis Hancock. This is a graphic novel, and it's about Lewis, who goes through puberty as a girl. They are assigned female at birth, and their struggle with not feeling like a girl and eventually coming to the conclusion that they are trans, and how that kind of went through their lives. One thing I love is, so this is Lewis here, and throughout the book he kind of like pops up as he's telling this story, and he's like, oh hey mom, like what did you think, and you know, I'm sorry that like I acted this way, and their mom was like, no, like I'm also sorry, like there was just things that we didn't know. And I believe this is set around the early 2000s when, you know, trans people have always existed, but the way in which they exist today, where, you know, it's a lot more talked about just in general, that, you know, didn't used to be the thing. Also, one thing about this is it is incredibly British. There's so much British slang in here, and it takes a minute to get used to, but like it's just so fun. It's really fast and easy. I actually found this at a Goodwill, and I just think that it was a great time. Next is Cherish by Tracy Wolff. This is book 6 in the Crave series, and I'm glad this series is done. I didn't feel very drawn to this one in particular. It's the ending of a series. Things wrap up in a fine way, in my opinion, but I just don't. When my youngest sister gets to be an appropriate age, I really want to give these books to her and see what she thinks about them. I think that she would really like them. But right now, as I am a 28-year-old woman, I'm just like, they aren't as good as I remember them being in my early 20s. But that's okay. They exist for a reason, and they gave me joy at that time. Next is Alone by Morgan E. Freeman. This is a book written in verse, which means it's like kind of poetry style, right? So what happens is 11-year-old Maddie she lies to her parents, says, I'm gonna go to X's house. Her friends are supposed to lie to their parents as well, and they're gonna have a little party sleepover at her grandparents' house. Well, she wakes up the next day and everyone has been evacuated. Everyone is gonzo. It's kind of like Hatchet for girls, but she doesn't have to do like the wilderness survival thing, because she's just able to loot other people's houses and stores and stuff. And I don't say loot in like a bad way, it just is. It was a fine story. I'm definitely not going to put it up for extemporaneous reading poetry. I don't think that it would fare well when I'm thinking of like students performing this, but it was fine. I'm glad I read it. It was an interesting experience for sure. It deals a lot with like grief and loneliness. Oh my god, so much loneliness. If you have a teenager in your life and they are going through some just, you know, the angsty teen stuff or even tween, I would say this is appropriate for ages. I mean, the girl starts when she's 12, so I'd say between 11 and up. I would say give this a try, especially if you have a kid who doesn't like to read that much. This might be 400 pages, but the thing is like there's not many words on each page, and we're still having the story go through. I thought it was really, really interesting. So it was okay. And the last book that I finished in the month of January was New Handbook for a Post-Roe America, The Complete Guide to Abortion Legality, Access and Practical Support by Robin Marty. This was a really short book. It's just over 200 pages. And even though we are currently living in a post-Roe America, I thought that it would still hold a lot of really important information, and it did. This talks a lot about the possibility of Roe being overturned, although Robin Marty had a very good idea of what, you know, post-Roe America was going to look like, and that's the crazy part for me, is that we are just so predictable as human beings. Some of the chapters include planning for your own emergency. Roe is over, what does that look like? And so it went through all of the states in the United States and was like, these states have trigger laws, these ones don't, this is probably what's going to happen. Finding your personal care, reproductive justice, knowing your comfort zone. And I thought that this was a really good book for anyone who is wanting to dip their toes into activism too, because it talks a lot about making sure that you are giving what you can and not over giving yourself in a way. So I still thought that this book held value and meaning. It's just a little outdated, unfortunately. So those are all of the books that I read in January, and now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the books that I have been reading and the ones I plan to read in February. So February is Black History Month, and I have already finished a couple books that I have from my bookshelves for Black History Month, but here are 4 more that I am planning on reading. This one I am already like a good chunk of the way through. This is Claude McKay's Romance in Marseille, and this is about La Fala, who wakes up after stowing away on a ship with no more legs. No more legs for him. He has his legs amputated because his feet froze, and he actually gets a lawyer and is able to fight in court to get prosthetic legs and also a big chunk of money. And right now in the book, I'm in the place where he's kind of like figuring out what he wants to do with his life. He's back in Marseille, which is in France. I didn't know that. Now you know. And he just very one-track minded man. He likes girls. He likes women. Can't knock a guy for liking women, right? Claude McKay, this story, Romance in Marseille, went through a lot of different iterations. He wanted to write this story about, you know, La Fala with kind of no plot, and that's kind of what I'm getting. I'm liking it so far, though. La Fala is a disabled black man. He is not perfect. He is, you know, a flawed person, which is what kind of makes this book unique. I really am enjoying it so far, and I'm excited to see where the story goes. Next is Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. And this is a teeny tiny little guy. I did check out the audiobook from my library just because that's how I'm able to read books. I love audiobooks. About Ta-Nehisi Coates talking to his son, I believe, about what it means to be a black man in America. And I think that this is a really important text. This is something that I've been seeing like kind of rotating around for many years. I did find this at a Goodwill, and I'm really excited to read it. This one I have started a little bit. I am on chapter 1 after the prologue. This is White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide by Carol Anderson. I love reading books about why white people suck. Is that bad? Like on page 3, it says, white rage is not about visible violence, but rather it works its way through the courts, legislatures, and a range of government bureaucracies. The trigger for white rage inevitably is black advancement. I love when people can break down all of the dumbassery that I feel like I am told by other white people. So this is something that I know that I'm going to love. It's actually really short. It looks longer than it is. It's actually just under 200 pages, I believe, because there are so many notes, and so like this is all notes and sources for writing this book. That's how you know it's gonna be good shit. So I'm very excited. I'm already really liking it. So there's that one. And then this is Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. I've never read Toni Morrison before. I know that this one is particularly about a young black girl who wishes she had blue eyes because blue eyes are supposed to be the prettiest. And this addresses a lot of beauty standards and how, you know, white Eurocentrism affects young black girls. So I am very excited to read this one, read my first Toni Morrison. And then some books that I have been reading. So I am still chugging along through the Bible. I'm doing pretty good. Today I need to read Deuteronomy 10 through 12. So once I'm done with Deuteronomy, that's actually all the books of the Torah. The Torah is only the first 5 books of the Bible. I feel like I was told and then regurgitated in other places that it was the first 7 books of the Bible. That is not true. It is 5, because it is also called the Pentecost. Penta, 5, duh. I am excited for when we get back to more story time. Genesis was a banger. Loved Genesis. But I feel like since then and then like Exodus 1 through 4 with Moses, you know, going to get the Egyptians, I feel like we haven't been having as much story time. It's a lot of laws right now. And I'm just like, I don't really need to know about how you put blood on earlobes and toes. That's not what I signed up for. But I mean, good on you, I guess. So we're just chugging along. I just read my couple passages a day and that's what I do. I also have been reading Moby Dick. I am on page around 226. I did start listening to the audiobook of this once Herman Melville started info dumping on everything. I feel like we've been taking a break from the story and just like God knows what. I mean, good for him, but I want more Ishmael and Queequeg. I want more Ishmael and Queequeg. And then another book that I am reading is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I took the dust jacket off because I can't stand reading with a dust jacket on. It drives me crazy. And right now I'm on page 46, just on chapter 3. I've just been reading a couple pages before bed. I have wanted to read this for a long time. I know that it explores themes of like language and colonialism. Right now, Robin is just about to go to Oxford, and we'll see what happens from there. I did feel like these first 40 pages were so much set up for Robin, which, I mean, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. I'm sure that later on it will feel more important that we had this backstory, but it just felt like it really dragged for me, so I'm hoping that the story picks up a little bit more, especially because of how big this is. And that is everything I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!